What say you about the Michigan Wolverines in 2024?
Well, first I'm going to turn my legal pad as somebody ancient to my Michigan page. Okay, Michigan's in a fascinating place, right? They finally break through. Coach leaves. In the right year, they won. Right, that schedule and experience and talent and quarterback, the stars aligned. And say what you will about any sort of investigations by the NCAA and any off-field stories, they won the games. They did win the games. And so now they have a follow-up act that will be fascinating. So obviously Sherrone Moore, offensive line coach, interim head coach last year when Jim Harbaugh missed time, steps in. Coordinator's an internal hire. Wink Martindale as defensive coordinator is not internal, but has very close connections to both Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald, the last two defensive coordinators from Michigan. Hey, sorry for the quick interruption, but it'd be incredible if you considered subscribing to the Solid Verbal YouTube channel right down below. I would expect, at least this year, the Michigan offense to look very similar, that given Sherrone Moore and his background and success and what worked for Jim Harbaugh and given the personnel still there, I think it's going to be similar intent on offense, and I think a lot similar on defense because of that connective tissue. Wink Martindale's known to be more aggressive, right?
Aggressive and attacking, would you say?
Sure. Aggressive and attacking, absolutely.
Great. Aren't they all?
Aren't they all? Michigan did not have to blitz a ton last year because when you have the defensive line that they had, and so obviously guys like Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are back and were huge contributors last year. But, Chris Jenkins was there last year. They had big names on the edge. They didn't have to blitz a ton. I expect they're going to be a little bit more creative, maybe because they need to, because it's just not as deep a unit up front. So maybe that's the difference on defense. But all in all, I think the intent, once again, is going to be there on offense. It's basically a new line up front on offense. We know Donovan Edwards, but now it's his first time as the full backfield weapon, like an every down type guy instead of a change of pace type guy to Blake Corum, who's now gone, and I think on the Rams. The big question with me on offense is what everybody's question is with Michigan. It's quarterback and passing. It's if teams are loading up the box and successful, which is, an if, it's a maybe, but successful stopping the run, what do they look like on 3rd and 9? What do they look like on 3rd and 11? What do they look like on 4th and 7 deep in the game where they need that, huge play to keep a potential game-winning drive going? And so whether it's Alex Orji or somebody else, there's promising youth at quarterback, but very green. And Alex Orji himself was just kind of a change of pace running threat last year.
He was a running quarterback.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think in the Alabama Rose Bowl, there was an opportunity for him to throw, but it wasn't there. Like that was going to be the big change with Alex Orji. And I think mixed results in the spring game, some plays made. Michigan just is not where it was in terms of offensive experience and talent, and especially at receiver. Like Samaj Morgan's interesting, smaller, and open field, terrific. But is he somebody that can run a full route tree that is going to sort of take gravitational energy from the defense? TBD. We'll see. I don't know if I think he'd be a really good 2 or 3 on a championship caliber team. I don't know if he's a number 1, but there's promising youth like there are at most places at receiver. The defense to me is really interesting because it's how much will they need to do to get Michigan into that playoff conversation. Defensive line should be really good. There's rotation guys back on the edge, rotation guys back at linebacker who played a good amount of snaps, a couple transfers, one from last year, one from this year from Maryland. The secondary is in good shape, but not as deep, right? When you lose the star power that they lost in the secondary, especially Mike Sandristel, who was just all over the place and an emotional leader for Michigan. We know Will Johnson is an All-American. We know he's a first-round pick. We know he's sticky and ridiculous as a cornerback. They should be good at safety. Still a little bit beat up there at safety. I think it's Rod Moore who went down. But they're good. They're not as deep. They're not as talented across the board as they were last year on their championship team. But you only play against the teams you play against. And Michigan's schedule is difficult as compared to last year. But all things considered, like the offenses that they'll face and the defenses that they'll face mainly, like Oregon and Ohio State are going to be tough defenses. Beyond that, Texas in the non-conference, yes. In the Big Ten part of their schedule, that's kind of it in terms of obviously able to match up on defense and give this offense a lot of trouble. Texas week 2 is not nothing, but it's in Ann Arbor. USC a couple weeks later, not nothing because I think they should have an offense, but I think you give the edge to Michigan in terms of defense versus the USC offense. It'll be tough at Washington if Washington has that full month to develop into something interesting. They host Oregon in November, so they'll have a concept of where they are offensively by then. And they travel to Columbus. And they don't have to play in the weird 15,000-seat stadium on the lake because that game is in Wrigley in November. Excuse me, that game is in Ann Arbor, but either way, they wouldn't have to. I think their schedule's fine. I like Michigan. The dangerous thing that Michigan has, once again, is if Orji or whoever the quarterback is and the offensive line comes together nicely, that even if they're a B-plus offense, they're going to win double-digit games. But that's a big if to me. And they are in danger themselves if it doesn't come together and the schedule turns out to be as daunting as it appears this year compared to where it was last year.
They're dangerous because of the defense. I think that goes without saying. Yeah. There's still plenty of talent on hand. The defense, by the time all is said and done, should be one of the better units in the country.
Yeah.
And the concern is on the offensive side of the ball. Right. And how this campaign starts off. Is the defense good enough to paper over some of the early sins that we might see from the offensive side of the ball? Because the offense is really where it's new. It's J.J. McCarthy leaving. It's the line completely new. It's Blake Corum. It's the top two receivers. There's a lot of change there. Granted, Donovan Edwards on the cover of the video game, but his first kind of go at being the featured back. Colston Loveland, who we didn't mention as well.
Yeah, might be the best tight end in the conference. Yeah.
One of the better tight ends in the nation, let alone the conference. You know, there obviously is going to be talent on any Michigan team. They have recruited well, but with this level of turnover, that gives me cause for pause, my favorite pet charity.
Sure.
I am as out on Michigan this year as I was in on them this last season.
What does that mean?
Around this time.
Record-wise.
It means this is a 9-3 or an 8-4 team.
Okay.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think given the turnover that this program has to contend with, it's totally reasonable that would be the final result. I don't think they're beating Texas. I don't think they're beating Oregon. I don't think they're beating Ohio State. It would not surprise me if they drop one elsewhere along the way.
Who would be the most likely? I guess I did the Michigan preview. At Illinois is interesting to me. Depending on what Illinois looks like. If Illinois can sludge up that game, it would be the second consecutive road game. They have a bye week before Illinois, but it's at Washington, at Illinois, and it's sort of a look-ahead spot before Michigan State and Oregon on the road, and it's sort of into October. You might get like cold weather, which, again, Michigan has no problem in cold weather, but in terms of being able to sludge up a game, we saw it a couple of years ago, Illinois have that ability against Michigan, a good Michigan team a couple of years ago, and I think that would be the spot I would circle in terms of like clearly inferior team, caught them on the right day.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a week before the Michigan State rivalry.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's a look ahead.
I don't think Michigan State's going to be in a great place, but
no,
look ahead potential is there. I also considered Minnesota. You know, I'm high on Minnesota. I'll talk about them a little bit later.
That's true. That's also a sandwich game.
Sandwich game between a home tilt against USC and a road game against Washington. Easy to overlook Minnesota in that specific situation. But it's a good team. They're not as good as they were a year ago. I think the schedule is spaced out okay, but there are harder teams on it. And I'm just not getting the vapors from Michigan the way I did in 2023. So I wish Sherrone Moore well. I hope that continues to progress in a really positive way, but he's got his work cut out for him on the offensive side this year to try and reconstitute this thing. I'm not sold that Alex Orji can throw the football. We just haven't seen him do it. Doesn't mean he can't, but all too often when we're doing these previews, we're either assuming things as fact or we're hoping that they become true. I don't know what to expect from Alex Orji as a passer. I know he's a good runner, but accuracy on the passing side of things, should it come down to Michigan having to throw the football to win a game, that remains a great unknown to me.
No, I think that's all right, because what happens if you just sort of pack it into the middle and you're like, we're going to take away Colston Loveland, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to make a receiver beat us downfield. We're going to put our guys on an island because we don't trust these Michigan receivers to beat us. And when you look across the power in this conference, depending on how you feel about Penn State's new look receiving core with Julian Fleming, Michigan is 100% 4 out of 4 on those teams in terms of winter wonder potential at receiver. And whether it matters or not, it matters less when you have last year's offensive line and Jim Harbaugh coaching and J.J. McCarthy making plays. But if you don't have those outlets this year to keep a defense honest with this offensive line, I think still needing a minute, right? They're looking for guys. That's the last, that these coaches have talked about. They're like, yeah, we'd like to have more guys that we think might be able to step up if needed. I think you're right in doubting that. There is something, if you're led by defense, like I think Quinn Ewers could have a disastrous game in Ann Arbor against throwing into this defense, right? As good as I think Texas is going to be this year, I think that's just going to be crazy challenging to go on the road and take it to this defense. If you're Oregon, if you're Texas, whoever. So I think you give yourself a little bit of a cushion and grace when your starting point is this defensive line, which may be the best in the conference, and the secondary should be in a good place. You're right, though. I mean, we're saying the same thing.
We're saying, and listen, also, me saying they might go 8-4, 9-3 is not to say they're going to get blown out by any of the better teams on the schedule.
100%.
I think Michigan will be close with those teams, if only because of the defense. And believe me, I would love nothing more, just as somebody who creates college football content, to be able to talk all season long about the Michigan offensive orgy. That would be fun for us.
Sure.
We are not mature enough to handle that type of conversation for 15 weeks of the season plus the postseason. Rooting for it. Yes. Not sure if we can get it. We'll see.
Yeah. Should also mention, this is a conference that if you kind of only have a defense, you can still win 10 games.
You can still win 10 games. Yeah, you can.
It's a different conference, and when you have Texas and Oregon on your schedule, and you normally didn't before, it's different calculus from how Iowa has done things, but people have done it.
That's why I put them in my 10-2 tier.
I know. I hear you.
Even if I'm not feeling it. The over-under, by the way, is 9. I wouldn't touch it. I think that's the right number for Michigan.
Right.
Personally, I'm not going anywhere near it, but that's how Vegas feels about it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Michigan's hated rival,